Hi, my name is Lorica. I am a holistic health coach and I'm a Reiki practitioner and I study regenerative detoxification. And I wanted to talk to you today about my healing story, about the journey that I've had so far in life and my experiences and why I do what I do so you can get to know me a little bit better. So we're going to start from the beginning and I want to start from my early childhood. Uh, Oops, the slide is not moving. Hold on 1 second here. Ooh, okay. So it wasn't an easy start. I had a lot of trauma in my early childhood. I was a blue baby, so I was born not breathing, and I was in an incubator for a period. I also had some weird mystery symptoms in my early childhood, like leg cramps that would make me totally debilitated, fall on the floor where I couldn't walk, and a couple other things that came up here and there. But on a mental emotional standpoint, I also had some trauma in my early childhood. When I was about 6, 7, my parents got divorced, and their divorce was really drawn out. It was really ugly. And I don't blame them for it. It wasn't their fault. But I felt very, kind of dragged along in that process. And through that, it just was really a lot of stress for me in my young period. And I felt really rejected and a lot of turmoil. So I just went through a lot that I think I retained in my body or held on to, a lot of that stress. On top of that, we happened to live near it was a retired toxic dump site, but, I don't think that the area we were living in necessarily contributed to my later health problems, but it could have. So it's just worth noting we did live near that. And I drank all the tap water all the time. And we had a standard American diet, which I now know is not the best for us. So, back then it was the food pyramid, a lot of grains, a lot of meat. So just not the best diet. And so after my parents got divorced, I also had a little episode of what I would call like an OCD type of coping episode that didn't last forever, but it was a pretty acute OCD episode that was just kind of an interesting thing like that. I used that to process, I think, what was happening, but I had lots of fears in that period. And so as you can imagine, by the time I became a teenager, I was pretty troubled and got into a lot of trouble. I started smoking. I started using drugs. I was anorexic for a period. I just was really rebellious and, didn't have a sense of I would just take risks and didn't have a sense of consequence or a really strong sense of fear because I had already had, I think, so much fear inside me and insecurity that it was almost like I kind of went to a place where my life didn't matter as much, I think, to me. On the flip side, I had a strong coping mechanism that I used with my art and poetry. I did a lot of art and I wrote a lot of poetry. And I think that was more like a beautiful side to my story where I tried to process how I was feeling and what was happening in a more healthy coping mechanism that is just worth noting. So when I was around 16, 17, that is when my big physical issues began, when my big health issues started. I had a lot of mystery symptoms that started around that time, primarily started with female symptoms, bladder issues, bladder infections, and a lot of digestive troubles, digestive pains. And I became a vegetarian around that time as well. And part of it was for health reasons. Another part of it was ethical, but I just want to mention that I felt like that was a healthy choice and one step towards me trying to feel better and make better choices for myself. But overall, I was not taking good care of myself as a child and as a teenager. So moving into my 20s, I had, those mystery symptoms, those illnesses that had started in my teens got worse. I have a long laundry list of things that I was contending with, that I was dealing with at that time. What didn't have a diagnosis of anything, but all the doctors would say, oh, you have the symptoms of rheumatoid arthritis, or all these symptoms are of diabetes, but you don't test for it. I had symptoms of hypothyroid, Crohn's disease, diabetes, rheumatoid arthritis, digestive issues. I had, things like swelling, joint pain. I had chronic fatigue type symptoms. I had cramps. I had bladder infections, sinus infections, yeast infections, chronic allergies, adrenal fatigue. I had bilateral sweating. I had weird symptoms like flushing, neurological type symptoms. I had weakness on the left side of my body, muscle loss, or muscle weakness, and pain in my muscles, kind of like a fibromyalgia type feeling, tingling, numbness. I had brain fog, just all kinds of pains. I had, my limbs felt like sandbags. I couldn't open a water bottle in the morning. I was just in a lot of misery, especially at that age, at an age where I felt like I should otherwise have energy and I should be able to get up and go to school and work my 2 jobs and feel like I could keep up with my friends and my boyfriend at the time. And I just didn't feel like I was able to have the energy of the people around me. And it was really frustrating. I had, polyps that showed up in my colon after a colonoscopy. I had cysts that were developing. It was just, my body was non-cooperative. It wasn't happy. And I felt really depressed about it. So I spent pretty much that whole period in my 20s, just feeling like kind of in a quiet desperation. I tried some therapies. I started doing research, like in my mid-20s. I started doing a lot of research into, acupuncture, alternative healing, Ayurveda, nutrition. So I learned a lot, but I had a hard time applying it to myself at that time. I felt like I wanted to seek, but I still wanted an easy fix. And so I went, I did get acupuncture and I found that helpful, and I found chiropractic helpful. But as far as like really easing my symptoms and feeling better long term, there was really nothing that was helping me. And I did look into diet and elimination diets, but at the time I felt like being a vegetarian was already pretty restrictive. So I didn't I felt like, gosh, well, what else can I do? I felt like I should be healthy already. And I really thought I had developed more of a healthy vegetarian diet. In my younger years, it was more of a bean and cheese burrito, peanut butter and jelly sandwich kind of vegetarian, which is kind of a junk food vegetarian, and a lot of grains, which are not good. And I was allergic to wheat and I didn't even know it. But I just at this time was unwilling to do an elimination diet. I was unwilling to take the next steps because that was kind of my security. And I didn't really believe that those things could be affecting me to that degree. I didn't really believe the power of food, that and what it was having on my health. I do think food was a big contributor to some of my issues, particularly my allergy to wheat, to gluten. So, and that was just a piece of it, of course, but I do think that it's worth mentioning that, again, I grew up under the food pyramid, so I just didn't understand, and it was suggested to me to make some changes to my diet, but at the time, again, it just didn't get through to my thick skull. So I did try to get a little healthier in other ways and do other means and methods, but nothing seemed to help. So I was frustrated. By the end of my 20s or so, I had spent a lot of time trying a lot of different things, and I started just, again, feeling really down, and I had even stopped voicing my concerns to other people, to my family, and they were getting frustrated and tired of hearing me, I think, too, and they love me dearly, but they, I think were feeling, they told me, you sound like hypochondriac, or they would joke about it, but it did have an effect on me, and so I went more quiet and I went more inward, and I just knew nobody understood the struggle that I was going through, and there's really no way to convey that to anybody. So I held on to it, and I internalized a lot, and I was sick for quite a long time, and I wasn't listening to the signs of my body, and I wasn't looking at food as medicine at all. It was quite the opposite. I was just wanting to feel better. I just wanted relief. I wanted a release, and I wanted a quick resolution. I wanted a quick fix because, again, I was raised, not just with the food pyramid, but raised during the era of, pushing antibiotics, since I was given a lot of antibiotics, a lot of drugs, and I had that mindset of, somebody can give me something to make it better. I can take a supplement or a pill to make it better. And I tried everything. I tried so many different things, and nothing worked. And so I started to get disillusioned. And by the time I was in my 30s, I, had, my diet was, kind of pretty much the same. My feelings were the same as far as my pains and aches and my all of my physical symptoms, but a lot of things were changing during that time in my personal life. So there was a lot of highs and lows, and during that time, it was suggested to me, oh, maybe you should start eating meat again. Maybe you'll feel better. And so I did an experiment with that for a few years, and actually didn't feel better. But it's just worth mentioning, I did do that experiment for a few years, and I did eat meat starting about a year before I got pregnant with my first baby, and that's her there. And I, just had a lot of ups and downs during this time. My life was becoming more fulfilling in so many different ways. I had married my high school sweetheart, my childhood sweetheart, and we had reconnected after many years, and we had these two babies, pretty much back to back, a couple years apart. And I felt pretty good during pregnancy, or better during pregnancy than I had, considering. And then after I had the babies, it got worse. All my historical symptoms got worse and worse and worse. So finally, after my second baby, I got really tired of the way I was feeling. And on top of it, I was just feeling really stressed out with some responsibilities. My career path had also changed. That was another big change in my responsibilities with my work, and the amount of work I was doing and the type of work I was doing were just extremely taxing on me. And I was taking it home with me and staying up at night and just feeling really anxious about my responsibilities and what I was doing. So it was a ton of stress. And I, had these new babies to care for, which is such a beautiful, lovely, like wonderful thing in life. And I love being a mom, but it was stressful as well, because it's a new thing, and you're so concerned with their safety and their well-being, and that's a constant. So it was really hard for me to think about myself. And so it's wonderful that I could be selfless and stop worrying about my health issues. But in that process, I neglected to realize, like, my health issues had come to a point where they were all coming to a head, or they were about to come to a head. So, as I mentioned, I was starting to lose faith in conventional medicine, but I still was looking for answers. So, the other thing to mention during this time is I was getting lots of signals with my body. Like after my second was born, especially, I had some weird symptoms come up, like a year or two later. And I wasn't listening to a lot of the signals for a while. And then I started, going to the doctor and asking questions. But, as well, I wasn't listening to a lot of the signals on a mental, emotional level, if that makes sense. So I had a lot of signs to in my life, I think, to kind of go in a certain direction, and I didn't listen. I didn't follow those things. And I think if I would have, I think it might have helped me to process and deal with some of the stresses and my physical symptoms a little bit sooner than I did. But anyway, that's just a side note. So things were kind of out of whack between my body and how I was living. And so I started getting these weird symptoms. I had spotting, I had a fibroid that came and went, had some stomach bloating issues. My pants wouldn't fit anymore, but I was losing weight. I was getting thinner. And so it was really odd. And then they did an ultrasound and found an abnormal cyst in my ovary. So they watched it. We did some tests for several months. And ultimately, I ended up, I was suggested I take birth control, but I've been down that route. And so we eventually, decided, and the doctor said, to go to the oncologist based on one of the tests. But anyway, so we'll move on from here. So the slide kind of reveals what happened at the oncologist, but they had told me, like, oh, you'll be the healthiest person in that office, don't worry, because I was freaked out, of course, when they told me to go to the oncology office. And I was, 37. I was going to be 38 soon, but I was 37 years old, and I was terrified to be in the oncology office. And they ended up scheduling me for a minor surgery to check the cyst. And the initial pathology report immediately said, ovarian cancer. And I just didn't have time to process. They told me that when I was still under anesthesia. I had a bad reaction to anesthesia, and I felt like my head was banging into my skull. And I was just like, what? Like, I can't even process. I can't understand what you're telling me right now. And it was doubly horrifying because of the physical state I was in. Then I went home, and a day or two later, they said, oh, we double checked the pathology. It's actually borderline cancer, which in ovarian world is actually better than, full blown regular cancer. Then they made a mistake during that surgery. They discovered they didn't take out something they needed to take out, or that they had agreed to take out. So they went back in a few days later. The results of that additional tissue, though, were that I had, and the pathology and the second opinion pathology determined that I had a more rare aggressive type of cancer. So it was not borderline, but it was a high grade type of ovarian cancer that's more rare and tends to be more aggressive. So they prescribed a full staging operation, a surgery, and chemotherapy at that point. And my brain was just exploding. My heart was shattering. I felt just the weight of the world on me, like just crushing down. And that's the only way I can describe it. So unless you've been there, and maybe some of you have, but it's the worst. I mean, and the biggest thing on my mind was my family, especially, being there for my girls. And I remember just like praying and just begging, can I please have, at least 10 years, at least, whatever I can have. So, it's something that is undescribable, but it's a terror, and you have to process it. And I learned to deal with it, obviously. But it was a decision crisis for a while on what to do now. Okay, how am I going to deal with this? What are my best chances of survival? And we all want to trust doctors, but in my mind, I needed to figure out, what was best for me. And I had already been a little disillusioned by the medical profession. So I didn't want to not listen to my doctors on one hand, but on the other hand, I just didn't have a lot of faith. And my family, of course, wanted me to follow doctor's orders. They just wanted me to be okay, and they meant well, but I didn't have a lot of support for kind of doing my own research and going my own way. But I did it anyway. I started doing a lot of research, and I found a lot of, backing for doing chemo and going the conventional route with surgery. So it was, wasn't getting a lot of support for what my gut was telling me. My gut was telling me, not to do anything so big and drastic, and not to, definitely not to do the chemo. I felt very strongly that the chemo would kill me. I was terrified of the chemo, and, honestly, more so than the cancer at that point. And I think that's partly what gave me strength to eventually I had the strength to say no to the chemo, despite, I had several people and several doctors recommending the chemo, and I did not feel right to me at all. I can't even barely tolerate a glass of wine, and I feel drunk. So I just knew I wasn't going to be able to say okay to that. And so for me, I researched, and I did find a couple people online, thankfully, that had gone that route, had said no to chemo, and they were okay. And it was years later, and that really gave me a little bit of inspiration. So that was helpful to me. And I was able to hold my ground with the doctors and made the decision. And even though I didn't have a lot of encouragement to go the route I did, I was able to decide to do alternative methods instead of the chemo. However, because it was such a dire situation, according to the doctors, with the type of diagnosis I had, even though it ended up being early stage, they really wanted to do this full staging operation because they don't know what stage you are unless they do that. And so I felt really pressured to do that surgery for that reason. So that was my compromise. And a sacrifice ended up being a sacrifice. They take out several organs in that operation. They take out lymph nodes, which now I would never go back and do again. But hindsight's 2020, and I was, in fear, and I, did what I felt needed to be done. And that was, again, part of how I weighed saying no to the chemo was, okay, I'll accept this situation and say yes to this, because there's a lot of fear with ovarian in particular, like, oh, the fluid in your abdomen is all touching, the ovaries are, same fluid is touching all the other organs, your liver, all these crucial, organs that you have in there. And then that it could be, the cancer cells could be spreading around in there. So that's the fear with that. And that's the mentality. And, on the other hand, some people in the alternative or holistic say too, you can actually spread it that way by going in there. So nobody really understands how any of that, plays out in the end, I think. But again, in retrospect, I think I would have pressed pause in between my initial smaller surgeries and this major surgery, and waited and maybe tried some more holistic things if I would have more time and more encouragement or more support there. But I can't regret. This is part of my story, and so I want to share this part with you. And I look really happy in that picture, but I was devastated, and I think I was happy to get out of the hospital. That was when we were leaving the hospital. So, but it was a really dark time, and I don't have any more I don't think I have any more pictures. I couldn't find any more from that period, and I wouldn't have been taking pictures at that time, and I wasn't on social media and didn't have any, reason to want pictures of myself in such a dark place and to remember that. And I had kind of the opposite, like, okay, let's move on to the next thing now so that I can get better. So that was over 5 years ago now. It'll be 6 years in 2020. And so very fortunate to be here and to be sharing this with you today. And I think one of the big things I did well after this surgery is key for anybody else having a major surgery or trying to heal from something like that, is that I looked ahead right away. I started looking ahead. Once I finished what I knew, I had agreed to do with treatment, I started looking ahead and I did not look back. And so I think psychologically that's a really big point to make. Is that, I didn't just go home and lay down, and I did spend some time dwelling and contemplating in between my surgeries for a few months there. But after this point, when I got home from that big surgery, within a few days, I had my sister-in-law, who's a nurse, taking care of me, and she was like, "Wow, Lorca," she's like, "I'm so impressed with you. I can't believe you're up and moving around already." And I couldn't lay there. I couldn't succumb to it as how I felt and how I looked at it. So that's just something I want to emphasize for anybody out there that's going through something like that. The sooner you can kind of gather yourself and get up and get going, doesn't mean you have to run a marathon, but get moving. I was walking around the block, even just walking around my street, around my cul-de-sac a couple times a day, and just things like that. Don't let your situation keep you, laying down unless you absolutely have to be. So this was a turning point for me. This was about a month after my surgery when I was, finally able to get out and about again. And that's me and the girls having a little day out. We're going to the merry-go-round in the park. And I love this picture because this picture symbolizes to me everything on the other side of like the darkest period of my life. It's like a bright, happy, sunny picture for me. So this was a period when I had, because I had said no to the chemo, but I had been so scared into, the understanding that my type of cancer was so dangerous, and that I would likely, if I may not make it to the two-year mark or necessarily beyond that. But if I did, I might be okay. And so I just had it in my head, I still need to do something kind of extreme. So I did a lot of research, and I did end up doing some alternative treatments for a few months there. But I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about that. I don't think that period played a huge part in my survival, other than that it was a strong placebo effect doing some of the alternative stuff. So I think it was helpful in that regard. But as far as really having a true impact on my physical healing, I don't think there was a long-lasting effect from some of those things. And maybe I'll do another video about what I did in that regard. But anyway, the main point is I did more research, and I educated myself more and more, and I began looking within more and more and reflecting on my core beliefs. And I improved my diet more. I eliminated more, of the foods that I think contribute to cancer, or the animal products, the glutens. I eliminated more and more foods outside of those as well. So I did a lot of research. I did a lot of meditation and emotional work, some energy work. I tapped into my desire to heal and my belief in healing. I did some methods for detoxification. I contemplated, more on my reason to live. And you're looking at him here in this slide, and my husband as well, my extended family. But this is where I was at that time, was such a strong empowering place. And even though I had so much fear, I still felt very haunted, like there was something chasing me. I felt like I had discovered like this ray of hope, and I was just going to follow it and not look back. And so that's what I did. And in my heart and soul, I believed with all my might that I would heal. And I think that's partly why I'm here today. So some of the physical things I did that I want you to know, because lots of people are always wanting to know like all the physical details, and this slideshow, this video isn't really about giving you all the details of what I did. I do other videos, and I also, share those in other ways, and will share those, and I answer questions from people all the time and do free consultations all the time where I share things like that. But for these purposes, I just want to give some general framework of what I did for the natural part of my healing journey, which is really the big part of the physical component that I think has made a difference for me. And that's that I took, appropriate measures, and I was so disciplined about the measures that I took. I was strategic about it. I educated myself. I became certified in integrative nutrition. And I, also ended up studying Reiki energy healing and training in regenerative detoxification techniques, which have been a huge part of my journey and continue to be a huge part of, my journey. And so, disciplining myself and using lots of fruits and vegetables, raw foods has been huge for me. I mean, there's been a lot of trial and error in my process, but I've developed a protocol that works well for me, and I feel better than I have in years and years, and have been able to basically cure myself of all the chronic symptoms that I had, the chronic disease symptoms that I had for 20 years prior to my diagnosis. So it's been incredible. And I just want to emphasize that nature has been, really on my side, and I believe it's on all of our sides. I believe that, our bodies are nature, and not to sound hokey, but it's all one, we're all one that way. So I've been able to tap into that, and I really used food as medicine in that regard. And I think that it's something to not underestimate. Don't underestimate the power of food, because I did for many years, and I paid for it. I think if I would have learned these things back when I was 22 years old, I probably never would have had a diagnosis of cancer. I would have probably felt great in my late 20s. So this is why I'm here. This is why I want to share this stuff with you. And my story is important. It's not because it's important to me and I want to put myself out there and focus on me. I really I want to focus on you and what you're going through, and how my story might help you. So kind of, we've been talking about this, but what I discovered is that nature is a healer, and that nature is powerful. I believe in the power of nature. I learned to trust my inner voice, to trust what my body knows. My body knows what to do, and I let it do what it's supposed to do. I don't get in its way. I don't put things in it that are going to get in its way. And I also believe that, I've come to know that manifesting is real, that you can manifest your reality. So this is a little more on the energy side, but I believe that, we create our reality to a large degree. And so we can control things, but we can't control too much. We can't hold on too tight. We have to pay attention to our beliefs. We have to pay attention to our thoughts. We have to pay attention to our words. They have power. They all have power. So if we don't identify with our illness, we're going to be much better off. We're going to be able to create healing. If we identify with healing, that's what will come to us. So I strongly believe that, I really think that we can't identify with disease if we're going to create healing. So, kind of developed my own healing protocol, but you don't have to follow an exact protocol if you follow nature, and if you follow your hope, and if you get clear on your path and intuitively connected to your body. I can't emphasize that enough, just intuitively connecting to your body and how you feel. And, certainly you want to do the physical things like the raw fruits and vegetables. You want to alkalize your body as much as possible, because disease cannot thrive in an alkaline environment. You want to heal yourself that way, but you have to look at it holistically and look at the idea of hope and the idea of your beliefs and your thought process. Your mindset is huge. So that's what I've discovered. I've discovered the power in all of these things, and it's really a multi-level approach. So So that's why I started the Healing Call is, because I want to help others to thrive. And this picture was taken just a few months ago, and this is us at the park, just kind of enjoying. We had a little family photo shoot there, and I just can't emphasize enough how grateful I am to be here and to be able to share this journey with you all, and that I get to make my future every day. And 5 years out may seem like a long time to some people. If you're just diagnosed, it may not seem like a long time to other people. But I am very confident in the path that I'm on, and I feel so good. I really go by how I feel. And I feel better than I've ever felt, since I've been, chronically sick for the last 25 something years. So anyway, the last several years I've been blessed with great health. I've never had a cancer reoccurrence. My markers went down and they never went back up, and my scans are clear, and I couldn't feel more blessed. And again, I feel like I'm getting healthier and healthier with each year. So because I feel so good, I want to share that with other people, and I'm excited about the idea of multi-level healing and peeling back the layers with people, dealing with physical, emotional, mental, all of that. So if you have something to heal, please reach out and be in touch with me. I'd love to hear from you. And sending lots of love and light to you all. Thanks for listening to my story. All right. Let me see if I can figure out how to stop this.